what's up YouTube, Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your rear brake pads and your rear brake rotors on a 2010 Acura TL. Now the first thing that I like to do is push this caliper piston back inside the caliper, which will make room for the new thicker pad material. Before we do that, we need to pop the hood and take a look at the master cylinder. Make sure that the fluid level is not so high that it's going to overflow and make a big mess. Now, if you look carefully, you can see right there, it says brake fluid. So we know that our brake fluid is right underneath this plastic engine cover. We just need to pop these little snaps off and take it off. Now, these were all very loose, and so it looks like somebody's had this off before, but that's okay. Let's take a look at our brake fluid level here. So I don't know if you can see, but there's the minimum line down there, and then the maximum line is right here in the lid. Sometimes a flashlight will help you see the actual level of fluid, and you can see right there, ours is well below the max. So we've got enough room in here to push those caliper pistons back in without overflowing and making a big mess. A lot of people ask me if they need to remove this cap when doing so. You can if you'd like, but I have not noticed a difference in the resistance when pushing the caliper pistons back in, whether I remove the cap or not. It seems like any trapped air that's in here is still easily able to escape, even if I don't take the lid off, so I don't usually take it off. Part of the reason I don't take it off is because exposing that brake fluid to air, or the moisture in the air, causes it to degrade and go bad. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning that it absorbs moisture, and that causes it to go bad. So I usually leave this cap on unless we need to open that up in order to see the fluid level. In our case, you can see it's right down here, it's obvious, and we've got plenty of room. So let's go ahead and go push that caliper piston back in, and we should be good to go. All right, now that we know we have enough room, we can push this caliper piston back in. I'm just going to use this right here, this little pry bar screwdriver hybrid, and just wedge it in through this little opening and pull that towards me. You can see that that goes pretty easily, and now we have a lot of room in there. I'm going to shift it again over in between the inside pad and the rotor and do the same thing. That's one way to make sure that you have it pushed all the way back in. It looks like our shim is starting to fall off here, but that's okay. All right, now we can loosen and remove the two slide pin bolts here, and these are a 12 millimeter. Just going to see if I can break these loose first. Now, sometimes the slide pin itself will also spin. If that's the case, you'll need to get an open-end wrench to hold this steady while you take out these bolts. But that's what they look like. We can set those out of the way. All right, then we can pull off the caliper. And again, this shim is kind of falling out, and that's okay. I'm just going to use this little caliper hook and hang this up over here out of the way. You just really don't want to let those dangle or drop from the brake line. All right, then we can pop out the old brake pads. They were well worn down, but not quite metal to metal. Really close to hitting the noisemaker here, but just not quite there. Just very, very close. This probably would have started squealing or making some noise in another week or so. All right, now we can loosen and remove these two caliper bracket bolts, and those are 17 millimeter. I'm just going to try to break these loose first. Now here it's a good idea to have one hand on this bracket so it doesn't drop to the ground while you're taking out this other bolt. And then we can take this bracket off. All right, now to take this rotor off, it's very important, number one, that you have the parking brake off, and ours is off right now, so you can see that this spins pretty freely. Now, we do have the parking brake shoes inside here. When the parking brake is applied, those are pushing out, and you're never going to get this rotor drum combo off. Now, you also need to take note that these have two screws holding them on. Now, those are not Phillips. They look like Phillips, but they're actually JIS3. Now, I used to use a Phillips screwdriver to take these out all the time, and a lot of times they would strip, and that's probably part of the reason is I was using Phillips, when really these are JIS3. It looks very similar to Phillips, but it's a slightly different shape. If you get the right tool, it will actually make this a lot easier. Now, this is not only a JIS or Japanese industry standard, but this is also an impact screwdriver. You see right there, the name is Impacta by Vessel. Basically, this is a turning or ratcheting screwdriver. It's an impact screwdriver. When you hit the back of it, it actually will twist or turn counterclockwise every time you hit it. And that will help you take these out without stripping them. So let's give it a try here. I could feel it spinning as I was hitting it, and we got it. And sometimes you have two, like this one, so let's get this one as well. Once you feel it start to spin, you'll know that you got it. But that does seem to help break these loose, because otherwise these can be a real pain and you have to drill them out. Now, sometimes you get lucky and these come right off, and sometimes they're stuck on there pretty good. They almost weld themselves right here where the rust is on this hub, and sometimes they're really stuck to the face. If you notice, there are 2 threaded holes here, not where we took out those other screws we just took out, but right here. You can get 2 bolts that are M8 by 1.25 and thread them in, and they'll act as like a press or a force screw against the hub, and that will help pop the rotor right off. Or you could use my favorite method, which is this right here. This is called a rotor remover 9000. It's also called a Tanya Harding, and sometimes all you need to do is give it a few whacks and that'll pop the rotor right off. Like that. Okay, so we do have our parking brake shoes in here, and they look like they're in pretty good shape, so we're not going to worry about changing those out, but I am going to give a quick spray in here with some brake cleaner just to knock off any of that loose dust. You just don't want to soak this pad material that's on the shoe itself, or the friction material. If you soak these in brake cleaner, it can cause the glue that bonds them to the backing plate to come loose. So just a little bit on the outside, and really I'm just going to be focusing on this area, just trying to knock off some of that dust. That should be good. Another thing I want to point out is on the old rotor, we have this little rubber plug. The new rotor does not come with that, so we need to pop that out. I'm just going to push it all the way through, and then we should be able to put it on the new rotor. There we go. This right here, just pop this out of the old rotor, and we need to put that in the new rotor. After we get everything put together, you can see this little star wheel right here. This is how you adjust your parking brake. So before you put this rubber plug into the new rotor, there's going to be an access hole, so you can actually reach through here with a flathead screwdriver and spin this, pushing those outward to adjust that parking brake as needed. Now, before I put on the new rotor, I'm going to clean the face of this hub with a wire wheel just to knock off some of that rust, and then we'll brush that with some anti-seize to prevent the new rotor from sticking. If you are going to use a wire wheel or anything like that on a drill, make sure you wear some safety glasses. Just going to hit that one more time with some brake cleaner. Now I'm going to brush the surface of that hub with some of this Permatex copper anti-seize just to prevent that new rotor from sticking. Really doesn't take much. Really just focusing on this shoulder right here. That's where the rotors seem to stick. But that looks good. Now the new rotor is packed in some oil to prevent these from rusting during shipment, so it's very important that you wipe that off as well. Just make sure you wipe all the friction surfaces, including the inside where the parking brake shoes go. All right, and then we can just line that up. It looks like our parking brake shoes are a little too snug, so I'm going to pull this back off. You can see the threads right here, so we are adjusted out a ways. I'm just going to use my same little pry bar here and turn that in. There, you can see the shoe itself came in a little bit. Let's see if that's enough to fit this on now. Perfect. Now that feels a little loose still, so I'm going to use the same tool right here, right through this opening until I can feel that, and I'm going to push it up just a little bit, just maybe a few turns. That feels about right there. You just want to have some resistance there, otherwise your parking brake will be way too loose. Now you don't want to overdo it or it'll drag and it'll be way too tight, but that right there, that feels about right to me. Let's go ahead and just clean this a little bit better. All right, now before we put this caliper bracket back on, we just need to take off the old hardware, clean underneath there and put on new hardware, and we're also going to take out, clean, and re-grease the slide pins. But we can start by popping off the hardware. Now these are different, so you need to take note. You see this little part that sticks out a little bit farther. Just make sure that you put that on the right side. You can see underneath where those clips go, it's starting to rust and a little bit of corrosion's building up there. So we're going to clean that off with a wire wheel, and then we're going to put some brake grease on there to protect that from rusting in the future. Just remember to wear some safety glasses here as well. All right, that looks pretty good. Now I'm also going to pull out the slide pins and clean and re-grease them. These are not stuck or anything like that, but we can just pull back the little rubber boot here and pull out our slide pins. Just going to wipe off all the old grease. It starts to cake up after a while and gets really hot, so it's important to clean these every time you do your brakes. Sometimes I'll put it back in once or twice just to try to get out a little bit more of that old grease. And this is the caliper grease I'm going to be using. This is the VersaChem synthetic caliper grease. I'm going to use this on the slide pins and underneath where these clips go. And then just as you push it back in, you just kind of need to pull a little bit on that boot to burp out any air. You don't want these to be pushing out. See, like that? We still have a little bit of air in there. Let's just squeeze that. And that looks good. All right, same with the other one here. Just pull back on the rubber boot and slide this one out. And we'll just get this all cleaned up. Pop it in again, see if we can get any more old grease out. And then we can just pop this one back in, just like that. Again, just kind of squeeze the boot and burp out any air. If these are really stuck when you go to take them out, I'll pull off the boots and also just clean out this little opening inside here with some brake clean and some brushes I've got. But if they're not really stuck and they're working okay, usually I'll just kind of do like what I did just now, is just take them out, brush them with some new grease and put them back in, and just make sure that they're moving and spinning freely. And that looks good. Now, as I mentioned, I'm also going to put some of this same grease underneath where these clips go. That will just protect that from rusting and causing it to lift. It's very important that those clips seat flush, otherwise that can cause your brakes to bind. All right, and then the new clips, those just kind of clip or snap into place. It's pretty easy to do that. Just press them in. Same with the other one here. Just press it in. See this little part right here? You kind of have to pull that forward and then push it down. All right, so our caliper bracket is all cleaned up and ready to go back on. But before we put it on, I'm going to make sure that we put some thread lock on these caliper bracket bolts. I'm just going to use this Permatex medium blue. Just about out of this stuff. I think I need to order some more thread locker, but I think we got enough on there to make this work. All right, we just put the bracket back on to get these started. Now, the torque spec that I found online was 80 foot-pounds for these. All right, now I did this a little bit out of order, but we can put those rotor screws back in. A lot of people will say that you really don't need to put these rotor screws back in, really just to hold the rotor on while this goes down the assembly line. But I usually just put them back on, especially if they don't strip out. And then this little rubber plug right here, as I mentioned, it just goes right into this hole. I'm just going to see if I can just push that in without pushing it all the way through. There we go. All right, now before I put the pads in, I do like to put some brake grease on the back and at the end so that they'll slide in here a little bit easier. Now this stuff right here, the blue stuff I was using, it's not really a high temp grease, but I do like to use this on the ears or on the ends. I used to put it on the backs as well, but a lot of people pointed out that it probably just gets so hot and melts right off. And that might be the case for these ends as well, but it just seems to leave a little bit of a residue to prevent that from binding in there. So let's put the inside one here as well. Now on the back of the pads, I like to put some of this Silicone Ceramic Extreme by Permatex. This is for much higher temperatures. This stuff's going to stay on there longer than the lighter weight brake grease, even if it does heat up, whereas some of the other brake grease would probably just burn or melt off. This is really going to stick around and help dampen some of the vibrations, which cause noise and squeaks with brakes. So I'm going to just brush a little bit on either side of the back of the shim. That seems to really help quiet things down. Now, before I put the brake caliper back on, I'm just going to use a regular wire brush and brush some of this dust and dirt off of there so that that doesn't get all over our new brake pads with that nice new grease on there. Now here you also want to just inspect the rubber boot for cracking or anything like that. If it sticks out and you can't get it to go back in, sometimes you can pull on that a little bit with a pick and that will let the air out and it'll push all the way in. But this is ready to go back on the pads now. There we go. Now no thread lock needed on these caliper slide pin bolts. And just go ahead and get those started. Now I'm just going to zip these snug real quick. And then the torque spec that I found online for these is 17 foot-pounds. And you're done. Now, before you head out, it's very important that you step on the brake pedal a few times, which is going to push the caliper piston back out, pressing those pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Now, when you do this, don't press the pedal all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in your master cylinder. Just press it down halfway several times until it feels firm. And then don't forget to double check the fluid level in the master cylinder as well. Make sure that that's all topped off where it needs to be. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description where you can pick up some of these parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching and good luck.